Well, good morning. Welcome to our Tuesday morning thought for today. We're looking at the passage that John Seawright looked at on Sunday on our morning service, and the verses we're looking at particularly are John 20 verses 19 to 29. And we thought yesterday about that first verse and about Jesus coming and speaking to the disciples, and in speaking to them gave them this command in a sense of to be peaceful, to know peace, not to be alarmed at who he was. And the fact that the early church went on very often in their Sunday evening times together to pray the presence of Jesus Christ with them. Come, Lord Jesus, Maranatha. Now we're looking today at the next verse, or really verses 19 and 20 combined. So let me just read those for you before we go further. Verse 19 of John's Gospel, chapter 20. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. Interesting passage, wonderful passage, and you would just love to have been there, just as we often say, a fly on the wall, just to see what would have happened. And I have to assume, and I'm sure you're the same, that when Jesus suddenly appeared, not by necessarily coming through the door or the windows, but just appearing in the midst of these scared disciples, the disciples must have been even more scared in a sense, because that nothing like this has ever happened before and never happened since. And so Jesus has appeared in this resurrected body. We know that he hasn't yet been glorified and taken up to heaven. And there's this sense of we're not sure quite what this body looked like, or was it similar to his earthly body that he had, or was it more similar to his heavenly body that he would receive? And so we're not sure what happens, but the disciples were obviously scared because of what had happened. And Jesus tells them to be at peace and not to be scared about what's happened. And then he does something quite interesting. To prove who he was, he showed them his identification card, in a sense. Now, we know what it's like very often when in Northern Ireland, certainly back during the times of the Troubles, whenever the police would have asked you who you were, where you were going, and you'd maybe shown your driving license or a passport or something, which would have given your identification and made sure that the person who was asking it knew who you were. And we talk about identification being very important nowadays. When we were in Italy, we had to carry an identification card that gave our address and details, etc., about who we were in case we were stopped, and that happened quite frequently. But this is something which is important. People want to know if somebody is authentic. If somebody calls at your door and claims to be collecting money on behalf of a charity, you want to see some sort of official identification card that proves that that person is who they say they are. Jesus scared the disciples, spooked them in a sense. They didn't know what to think. He told them to be at peace, but then he did something which no one has ever done before, no one could ever do. John's Gospel says that he showed them his hands and his side. Luke's Gospel also mentions that he showed them his feet. Now, we know what Jesus is doing. Jesus has got these holes in his hand, these piercings in a sense, where the nails went through to hold him to the cross. We also know the feet are the same, and the side is obviously a reference to the sword that the Roman soldier thrust, or the spear that he thrust into Jesus' side, and from that wound came the blood and the water. And so Jesus showed them these things, knowing that when they saw the holes, when they saw the scars or the wounds in his hand, they would be able to say, "This is Jesus," and they would understand all of a sudden who he was. And that's exactly what happened, because we read, then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. I used to have an elder in one of my previous churches, a wonderful man who once said to me, he told me his favourite riddle. He often said, "What is the only man-made thing in heaven?" And the answers were the holes in Jesus' hands, feet and side. Now, I'm not sure if that's totally accurate. I don't think it's necessarily something we need to get too worried about. But if Jesus still carries those same scars, then those scars were basically scars that we gave him, the human race gave him. Those are the scars that won our freedom. And so we identify Jesus because of what he has done for us. We know who he is. We know we can trust him. Obviously, Thomas had a problem, and we're thinking about this maybe a little bit later on in the week. So our thought for today is, as Jesus used the scars to identify himself to his disciples, what do we use to identify ourselves to others that we are followers of Jesus Christ? Or do we somehow keep our identification hidden? Do we go through this world like Secret Service agents, not wanting anyone to know us? Or do we allow Christ to be shown in the way we conduct ourselves, the way we treat other people, the way we speak to fellow believers, but also to strangers? And there's such a huge question there. Jesus said, if you've done it unto one of the least of these, you've done it unto me. We sometimes are tempted to keep our Christian identity hidden, and we shouldn't. We should be displaying Christ to those around us. So that's our challenge for Tuesday today. Don't hide your Christian identity, but let people know who you are and what you believe, so that they will know and hopefully see Christ in you and be attracted to him. Hope you have a great Tuesday, and we'll see you again, God willing, tomorrow. God bless.